Malo lawe soifua, we are so honoured to have Tu'u Apulu Mary Autagavaia with us today to continue the talk about the Fagogo behind a lot of our old legends, and particularly around the idea of a lot of the female deities in our legends.
So when we talk about Aitu, the idea of gods were part and parcel of life in Samoa, in the Pacific. So we have gods that had human form, but spiritual powers. And so they would look like us, they would walk like us, they would eat with us, but they had supernatural powers. And in that way, that idea of the balance between humans and gods. So that's a huge jump to where we are now, the idea that God is supreme and that no one can, that we're mortals that cannot reach that. Whereas the ancient world saw humans and gods mingling and turning and struggling in terms of power and life itself. Aitu means the spirit. In Samoa, Aitu is anganga. Anganga is two words, anganga. Anga means come and go, so it comes and goes. So the spirit is free to roam. Whereas the physical world is probably more static. When we say the word Aitu, it doesn't mean to say they're devils. I think that's the colonial sort of take on the spirit. And we have demonized what we would call Aitu back in those days. So Aitu is primarily a spirit that roams within us and roams around us. So I think for young people, and I guess we're erring on the mental health thing as well, that we demonize people that are able to talk to the spirits, but in fact they are moving between those two worlds. They're having conversations between this world and the spiritual world. So in the Fagogo, or in the the stories of old, we see some really good examples there of someone in a physical form who later transverses into that spiritual realm, but still has an impact back into the physical world. And I think that's, if we think about life and death as well, we still believe, Polynesians still believe, even after death, our loved ones are still here with us. That's why we keep them in our house. That's why we sleep with them before we bury them. That's why they're buried right there in our front yard, because they are still part of this world. So our Polynesian way of life sort of sees these two worlds mixing continuously through generations, whereas in a Eurocentric view, it's very black and white. If I can't see it, it's of no consequence, where in fact there's huge consequences of the spirit world upon us. Teine Sā is a generic term that refers to specific beings. Teine Sā means woman, of course. Sā means sacred or set apart. We call the Catholic nuns Teine Sā because they've been set apart from the rest of the community for that piece of work. And in that sense, I guess, I hear a lot of young people nowadays refer to Teine Sā and Saumai Yafe in that sense. But I think the most important thing is that these women are not to be feared. They weren't evil spirits. They weren't ahiku that were demon-like. They gave themselves up in this life, in human form, to be of the spiritual form, and can continue to walk and live amongst us in a sense that they're cautioning us. And I think for women, you said the incident about, how we're covering up mirrors. That's about modesty. So the lesson that they're pointing out there, it's that idea about modesty. It's not that they are, being evil. It's that they exist to point us in a particular direction. But I guess in general, what these tamaitais do, they exist to tell us women who live in physical form, is just be careful. Often people say, they're just jealous of, because I'm beautiful. Samoa doesn't work like that. Samoa doesn't work about, it's just me. Samoa is about conforming to what the ideals of womanhood are. It's not just the tamaitais land is something that is not to be commodified. So those of us who are living have a responsibility to take care of the land, the sa'o and whatnot, but also the spiritual people have, and we know that because when we do something on a particular whanua that we're not supposed to be doing, then there's consequences for that. And sometimes it doesn't come immediately, but it comes, it may come later. So the idea of blessing and cursing was something that was specific to women before the missionaries came to tamaitai. In the sense that the tamaitai of the ainga had the ability to bless and curse her brothers, bless or curse his children. So they were very much a very powerful entity in themselves, these women. That was every family had these women. It wasn't just Teine Sā and Samoan. These women had, and in that sense they were the whiangainga. So they were the covenant that you dare not upset them. So in Samoa of old, when you did a umu, every Sunday or whenever you did the umu, there were two suas that you the first one went to the sa'o of the family, the matai, and the second one to the tamaitai. That's how powerful these women were. Now, along came the missionaries, and the idea that a human being other than God can bless and curse was just too much for them. And so they started to set about to dismantle this power. And we see that they've applied the word whiangainga, the covenant, to the ministers now, the religious ministers. And in that sense, our women that have, we've lost that ability to that power. But you still see it in the old relationships, the bar. You may see your parents in your household, your fathers when their sisters come. There's certain expectations, there's certain ways that the men will behave in respect and in honour of their, and same as the women. You see them, the way that they interact around the men folk of their family. It was about, taking care of each other, complementing each other. So, in that sense that these women that we're talking about, Teine Sā and Samoan and these deities are the same. They exist to bring balance to our lives, really, to bring balance to what we're doing in the physical world. And they speak to us from that physical world, that spiritual world. All that thing. They themselves were very beautiful women too, So it's not like, it's not an evil thing to be beautiful, or, it's the way we carry ourselves more importantly. And I guess for the way we carry ourselves is probably, if we understand the word tamaitai, the child to whom we ta'i the sua those days, that we presented the sua to. So the child of the female child that is sacred. And I guess for me, I want young women to understand that value, their worth, that each and every one of us, that if you have of Samoan blood, then you are of those origins, and the way that we carry ourselves, respecting ourselves, respecting others around us, and at all times maintaining those relationships.